So, I wanted to talk about my experience with my son being diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which is ALL, at the age of 2.5 years old. And I wanted to focus on the symptoms that he has had leading up to the diagnosis. That's my son. We went on a trip to Italy the month before the diagnosis, and at the time, he was starting to get sick with the flu-like symptoms, and also he has had an accident in the bathtub in which he did hit his leg on the side of the bathtub, and he started having bruising on the leg. So he started having trouble with walking, limping, and I did associated that with the accident in the bathtub. And I remember at the airport vividly that he had even trouble running. We were almost missing the plane. We're kind of in a hurry, and he had trouble keeping up with our pace. And I thought that was kind of weird because he's always been very fast kid, very energetic, always kind of running all over, and he was not really acting like that. So we started noticing some symptoms of lethargic symptoms and limping, bruising, which blue bruising was blue, light blue, or nothing major, like they look like regular bruises. And also when we were in Italy, he was sleeping a little bit more, less energetic, and he wanted to be in a stroller, most of the time, which I found that very strange. So I thought it was associated with the flu-like symptoms. Like I said, that he was lethargic. I thought it was kind of a viral thing. So when we came back home around June, he got sick with the COVID. All of us got sick with COVID, and so he was already sick, and then on top of it, he got COVID, and then all the symptoms, the fevers that he has had due to COVID wouldn't go away. So he constantly had fevers. And I went to the pediatrician more than once, maybe I think twice, and they still refused to do any type of testing, and they were kind of associating the bruises with the accident and the fever with the viral condition that he was having, or the COVID. And the reason why I think it was COVID is because we got tested, that we had the same symptoms that he did, and we all had COVID. So we assumed that he had COVID from us. Then the third time that I got worried because he kept having fevers and he was limping, I decided to go to the urgent care. They offered to do x-rays on the leg, and I told them, no, I don't think it has something to do with the hip or the leg. For some reason, I feel it's more related to like either a viral condition that he may have or something else. I don't think he has a broken leg or broken bones, because he is walking, he's just limping, and he doesn't have, like I said, any broken bone would cause him not to walk at all. In my opinion, I have a worsening pain, but he was not complaining, he was just limping. And they refused to do any blood tests because they didn't feel like it was a necessity, and they just prescribed him Tylenol or Motrin, whatever. And I think me and my husband made a deal that if his fevers and the limping wouldn't go away, that we would bring him to the ER and require a blood test. At that point, he was diagnosed with toxic novitis, something like that. That's caused by a viral infection that transfers from the lungs and transfers to the hip and the legs, and causes weakness and limping. I was not really satisfied with that diagnosis. I thought it was kind of strange. I actually asked around, is this a thing? I've never heard of it. And some people say, yeah, it can be common in toddlers because of weakness, and it should go in a couple of days. And it didn't. Sorry, my daughter wanted to be held. So that's where we are. And a couple days passed. My mother came from Italy and started noticing these changes, and thought, okay, so he became so pale. That's one thing also that I noticed. He was very pale, and he always appeared dehydrated. Even daycare was telling, is he drinking water? Because he looks always dehydrated. They said, oh, he's drinking, we're keeping an eye on him, and all of that. My mother immediately noticed something is wrong. In a month, he changed completely. He's weak, he's pale, he's walking funny, limping even more than when he was in Italy. And then also we noticed there was a bruise on the inner side of his leg and also on his face, cheek. The one on his cheek was blue, but we couldn't figure out how did he get it on his cheek. And then the one on his inner thigh was purple. And when I saw that, I knew something serious was happening. But the minimum, I thought it was anemia, right? A very severe form of anemia. So my mother said, we're gonna go to the ER, me and you and the baby, tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. sharp. I want you ready, we're going. So we went. He was tested. They were giving him Motrin because he had a slight fever again. He was getting weaker in the ER, actually. It appeared almost that he was fainting, which was kind of strange because he was fine. Even though he had fevers, he was still responsive. He was eating, was drinking. But when we went to the ER, he started collapsing almost. And they ran all the testing, which was the blood test. And then after they ran the first test, 3 nurses came in again and requested to do more testing. And that's when me and my mother looked at each other and said, okay, they found something, because why would they ask for more blood? And then the doctor, I guess the primary doctor in the pediatric ER section, came in and said, I need to speak with the parent alone, without the children, without any child, so alone. He made that statement, then that request, I immediately knew that it was serious. My mother knew it was serious, so we both were kind of like very shocked. And so when I was called into the room, he said, there's no right to say this, but your son has leukemia. It's a form of blood cancer. And then I kind of collapsed. I was like shaking. I said, oh my God. The first thing I said, because at the time I was pregnant, I just had found out a week before that I was pregnant. And I did say, God is giving me a child and taking my other child away, and my first child away. That's what the first thing I said. And then the doctor said, oh, are you pregnant? I said, no, well, we can cure him. We can help him. He's gonna have a long life. He can live a long life. We can cure him. We don't know which type of leukemia he has, but we can cure him. He can live, because I immediately thought that he was gonna die. I didn't know anything about leukemia or the cure. I didn't know anything, so I thought that he was gonna die, because leukemia, from the movies that I've seen about it, I thought that it was lethal. Like, there was nothing to do. There was no saving him. I didn't know about all these trials and the improvements in treatments. I knew nothing. So after that was done, then the doctor called my mother in to let her know that, you know, your grandson has leukemia. We don't know which one it has. We will do additional testing. The oncologist will come and see him, and then we'll start treatment right away. I called my husband. My husband was busy with something else, maybe for another video. But basically, he was trying to figure out what was going on, and I told my husband that to drop what he was doing, come to the hospital, and he asked what's going on. I said, well, your son has leukemia. And the first thing he said, holy shit. Like, it's the first thing he said. It's holy shit. And he hung up and immediately ran to us. Yeah, so when he came, the oncologist came he's a male oncologist, and he's the one that diagnosed him. So he's the primary doctor from the ER. He suspected leukemia. He called the oncologist. The oncologist analyzed the sample of the blood, advised us 99.9% of the blood sample was cancer cells. There were barely regular normal cells in his blood, and they found over 180,000 cancer cells in him. So in the samples that they found, that's how many there were. And the doctor did state that, I mean, I'm not sure if it was him or the other oncologist, because it was a group of oncologists, but you know, the one that spoke with us is the primary, is the head oncologist of the department, St. Peter's University Hospital in New Jersey. And basically, he said that probably my son would have not lived more longer than 3 or 4 days. He would have collapsed with sepsis, probably. So that was hard to hear, and I felt extreme guilt for bringing him so late. But I was trying to figure out what was happening. I was bringing him to so many professionals, and they still were refusing a blood test. So I wouldn't give up, but I was guilty of the fact that I waited so long to bring him to the ER. And I guess my husband also felt guilty, because when I was mentioning the ER to him in the early days when he was getting sick, he said, well, ER is for people that are really seriously ill, on the verge of dying. Like, he never perceived that all as a necessity. So he also felt very guilty of not taking him sooner. But it was kind of fast, so the doctor was holding my hand, and he was explaining the disease details to both of us. My husband was asking so many questions. I remember I used to be so annoyed by all these questions that he was asking. I said, oh my God, it's not the time. He has to start treatment now. He's dying, you know. So I was kind of in a different mood, because I was hasty. I needed to get to it. Like, I needed this treatment to start and be over with. Instead, my husband was trying to understand what was going on, what the treatment plan was. Like, he was trying to get the details. Yeah, so the oncologist was very, very empathetic, and I adored him the first time I met him, and he just was an angel, and he was holding my hand, and he was explaining everything to me very carefully and slowly. He was patient and calm. It was a calm energy, and he didn't seem worried at all. He seemed just empathetic and, you know, of the situation, but he seemed he knew what he was doing. Apparently, my son's case was the first since the years of COVID, after 2 years, because he was diagnosed in 2023. Well, 2023, yeah. So it was the first case after that, since before COVID-19 for the hospital. So for them, it was a shock, obviously. And they remember my son to this day, because of course my son has a very, very unique name. Not unique, but it's like unique for the United States, not very, very, you know, widespread use in the United States. Yeah, so that was the start of his treatment. The 2 days after, they kept him my daughter's is a little bit sick. So they kept us at the hospital. Obviously, they kept my son at the hospital for hydration, for fluids, and then it was a Saturday that he got diagnosed, and then on a Monday they immediately operated him to get a biopsy of the bone marrow, I guess, to extraction of the bone marrow, see the level of leukemia in his bone marrow. That's when they found 180,000 cells in there. It was completely obstructed. That they had to get the peripheral blood. They couldn't get a sample of the bone marrow, but they had to get the blood around the bone marrow, because it was so full of these cells so clumped together. They were like stones. And that's why he was limping, because it was a pain, and it was in pain, and it was like all the cells were all accumulated there and obstructing the movement and all that, you know. So he was operated to get the sample, and then a port was put in, and that was like 2 days later. So that's how fast they operated, you know, because it was a weekend. So, and then on Monday he was operated. I remember that when I found out at the hospital and they told me, the nurse held my arms and she was carrying me to the bath, like, not carrying me, but like accompanying me, holding my arm, escorting me to the bathroom. She thought I was gonna faint, so she accompanied me. I was complete shock, and I was devastated. But yes, so this is kind of the summary of the leading up to the diagnosis, and kind of in general, with as much detail as I can include in this video. But definitely I want to talk about more about other events that occur before the diagnosis, and also the treatment plan on its own. And hopefully this helps other families going through this hell. And yeah, and if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate. Thank you for listening.